Hey guys, welcome back. It's been a while since we last spoke, so we have a bumper edition planned for you today. So sit back, relax, and take in all the good news we've got for you. We've included a section on the major news that happened while we were on break for 2 weeks, plus all the good accountability news. So let's dive into your weekly update of empowering and easy to understand news brought to you by myself, Verashni Pillay, and the rest of the Explained Koza team. First up, our take party spats as elections draw near. In case you missed it, our local government elections are going ahead on the 1st of November 2021. This after our top court decided against attempts by the Independent Electoral Commission, i.e., the IEC, to move it to give them more time to prepare. This means that we're voting in just 2 months and it's causing all kinds of craziness. Remember when we told you in mid August that the ANC had barely met the deadline to submit their list of representatives for various locations to the IEC? Well, it turns out they couldn't get their act together despite a last minute deadline extension and missed out on submitting names for over, wait for it, 100 municipalities. This means that in 35 municipalities, the party could be unseated as the governing party or lose its status as the main opposition party without a single vote being cast for it, according to ANC's Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte. Other parties could simply walk into the gaps without having to fight much of a fight. Now, the ANC is attempting to still submit their candidates via court processes, but the DA and other parties are not having it. The ANC is fighting with them, and you'll see lots of this in the media. They're saying that the opposition is trying to elbow out the competition in the form of the ANC instead of winning on their own merits. Now, they have a point here, but we have to say, guys, you should have had your house in order, and this is an embarrassing look for the ruling party. I mean, come on. They can't even pull together a list to go to the elections. And as an aside, we've told you this previously, but it was partly because their finances are such a mess, they haven't been paying their staff who were on strike. Still, we have to call out DA Federal Chairperson Helen Zille's Twitter claims that the IEC are somehow in cahoots with the ANC over the whole thing. She's also managed to insult the integrity of our courts in the process. She was also proven wrong. Still, her conspiracy theories are super damaging to our democracy and pretty irresponsible given the lack of evidence to back it up. So, what happens next? In a nutshell, lots of court processes. When the Court ordered that elections go ahead between the 27th of October and 1st of November, they also ordered the IEC to open up voter registration weekend and other quote-unquote reasonably necessary amendments to allow for a smooth election. It was within these reasonable amendments that the IEC opened the candidate submission for the ANC and other parties so they could get in the names of those representatives that they had missed previously. Now, the DA is fighting this in court. Suffice to say, whether the ANC is allowed to submit names for these 100 plus municipalities or not is a fairly big deal. We'll keep you posted. Moving on to your big story, vaccine passports are the future. On Sunday evening that just passed, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced the country would be moving to level 2 lockdown. So, curfew has been relaxed to 11 p.m. to 4 a.m., so you can stay a little bit longer at those dinner parties. Indoor gatherings are limited to 250 people, and outdoor gatherings are limited to 500 people. Plus, alcohol can be sold between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. for off-site consumption. Now, dressed in a black and white pattern shirt, which caused a hilarious stir on social media, Ramaphosa also announced that the government will soon provide more information on vaccine passports. That also caused a stir. What are vaccine passports? Basically, it's proof that you have been vaccinated. You will have to produce it when traveling to another country or when entering big events. Countries like France have already implemented vaccine passports, but those who have not been vaccinated will have to produce a negative COVID-19 test result to enter restaurants and other public spaces. Now, of course, some South Africans are leery of the idea of a passport, calling it a mechanism of state control and protesting this together with mandatory wearing of masks. Guys, we hate to break it to you, you already need passports and sometimes vaccine records to fly to certain countries already. This is not new. It's a way a society can function. The only way we can get our freedom back is by being vaccinated. We can take inspiration from Denmark, which has lifted all coronavirus restrictions, only requesting that people produce proof of vaccination or lack of infection when visiting restaurants, bars, cinemas, and some other indoor facilities. And in case you're still hesitant, note the following. The Western Cape's Department of Health compiled figures of COVID 19 related hospital admissions and deaths of people over 60 recently from the 14th to the 20th of August. They released this data noting who was vaccinated and who wasn't, and the results are illuminating. Listen to this. Of the 729 admissions, those who were admitted with positive for COVID, only 30 were vaccinated. The rest were unvaccinated. And of the 292 people who succumbed to the virus in that time, only 5 were vaccinated. This speaks volumes of the effects of the vaccine. Meanwhile, kids could soon be next in line for the jab. Clinical trials of the Sinovac vaccine for children between 6 months to 17 years started on Friday, while the South African National Health Products Regulatory Authority announced last week that it had approved the use of Pfizer Biotech's COVID-19 jab, Comirnaty, for anyone over the age of 12. But the rollout will only go ahead after more elderly people get vaxxed. What do you think? Would you vaccinate your child? Moving on to your briefs, where fashion meets politics. The Met Gala took place on Monday, and we loved watching celebs strut their stuff on the beige carpet. Now, in case you don't know, the Met Gala is a famous event that happens in New York every year, except for during COVID, it was put on hold, where the who's who of various industries are in the US are invited as part of fundraising efforts for the Metropolitan Art Museum. Now, Kim Kardashian's all-black outfit, complete with full face covering, launched 1,000 memes. But our winner for the event was U.S. socialist-leaning Congresswoman and all-round badass Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. AOC, as she's known by her small army of fans, pitched up in a white gown with the words "Tax the Rich" emblazoned in red on the black, designed by conscious label Brothers Vellies. The dress was borrowed, and its black designer and activist Aurora James accompanied AOC to the event. The whole thing was certainly a conversation starter in the public sphere, with some calling AOC out for hypocrisy for attending the event in the first place. We think it was a pretty thoughtful response to, as she put it, being a woman of color from a working class background in such an elite space. Meanwhile, across the globe, Afghanistan women are also using fashion to make a statement in an online movement called #DoNotTouchMyClothes to protest the Taliban's recent takeover of that country. Afghan women across the world post pictures of themselves in colorful traditional Afghan attire to reclaim their identities in the wake of the Taliban's violent takeover of Kabul and its crackdown on women's rights. The Taliban, which recently announced an all-male government, announced that women will not be allowed to hold high positions in government and universities will be gender segregated. We love these women's fighting spirit. Going back to elections, this is the first election since the Political Party Funding Act of 2018 came into effect. We were pretty excited about this, and we've told you about it before. It would ostensibly force parties to declare any funded amounts of more than 100,000 Rand, ushering in a new era of accountability, or so we hoped. Last week, Thursday, the IEC released its first quarterly report on party funding. It turns out just 3 of the 504 parties registered with the IEC revealed their funders. Those were the DA, the ANC, and Herman Mashaba's Action South Africa. They declared a combined amount of just over 30 million Rand. What about the other parties? They said they didn't receive a single donation over 100,000 Rand. Bantu Holomisa hilariously said that this was probably a weakness of his party, the United Democratic Movement, their failure to raise money. Given his anti-corruption crusading, we're inclined to believe him, but we're not convinced about the EFF claiming they received no donations over 100,000 Rand. I mean, think about the detailed allegations of stolen VBS Mutual Bank funding finding its way to the EFF-linked interests. We find it hard to believe. Now, in terms of the declarations that were made, the DA said it had gathered 16 million Rand. 15 million Rand of that came from a single donor, Mary Slack, daughter of the late Harry Oppenheimer. Now, she acknowledged donating 15 million Rand to the DA, which is the maximum amount allowed from a single donor, but she said that she felt the transparency that is now required will be a deterrent for many donors. A lot of parties haven't declared anything because of this. The ANC Secretary General, or rather Treasury General, Paul Mashatile, also claimed that, thanks to the new rules, the ANC is now experiencing a situation where a lot of companies are very reluctant to donate. But listen, as Business Day puts it, the bottom line is, as awkward as transparency may be for potential donors, this is a necessary consequence of democracy. And in a country as savaged by corruption as South Africa has been, the more sunshine that falls on the nexus between funders and political decision-making, the better for everyone. Hear, hear. Onto some crazy arts news. Bang for your Banksy buck. If you're a fan of Banksy, London's famously anonymous graffiti artist, you'll remember how he punked the high end art industry on a massive scale back in 2018. His famous image of a girl letting go of a red balloon sold for a cool £1 million on auction at Sotheby's in London. But as the sale concluded, a secret paper shredder built into the frame started whirring away, shredding the artwork. Now, that shredder jammed halfway, creating a neat and iconic image of the problems associated with the commercial art world. But trust rich people to turn this into a thing. The half shredded image became famous, and the anonymous European buyer elected to pay for it anyway and proceeded to lend it out for exhibitions where it was wildly popular. People flocked to see the half shredded Banksy image. Now, this image is back on auction, and conservative estimates say it'll sell for £4 to £6 million. This means the painting will have appreciated by nearly 500% in almost 3 years. Wow. Moving on to your accountability monitor, there's quite a few things that are going right in our country. Let's focus on some corporate accountability. We don't have enough of that we hear about. The EU is returning the J&J vaccines to South Africa. We've told you about this before. In a weird and modern twist on colonialism, the contract between South Africa and Johnson & Johnson's to fill and finish manufacturing of its vaccines in South Africa had a loophole which required us to essentially give those doses to the European Union, who already have a stockpile of the vaccines. But after an outcry from the public and thanks to Ramaphosa's intervention, the contract has been converted to a license agreement which relinquishes J&J's control over where the vaccines can go. So they had to return those doses to us, and now they'll go to the African countries who desperately need it and who have been left out of vaccine supply so far. Guys, vaccine inequality globally is the issue of the day, so this is really good news. On to some political accountability. Julius Malema, the loud-mouthed red beret who always has something to say, has had some of his comments come back to bite him. He's been found guilty this week for breaching the Parliament's Code of Ethical Conduct on 2 counts. Sorry, this was actually last week. Firstly, he made a comment on migrants saying they should find more creative ways to enter the country when hard lockdown was imposed last year. He's been called out for that by the Ethics Committee. But he also breached the ethics code when he questioned a judge during the controversial JSC interviews in April. We told you about those. Those interviews were a dog show with politicians, mostly Malema, questioning judges in ways that were very problematic over their own personal issues and their own personal vendetta. But now the Ethics Committee has found that Malema was there as a representative of the National Assembly of Parliament. He wasn't there in his capacity as an EFF person or as Malema. He should not have asked questions about a case that related to him personally, which is what he did at the time. Now, we're especially glad that this happened because those interviews were a dog show, and politicians need to stop making these processes to select our judges, which is so important, a personal vendetta. Now, we don't know what the punishment's going to be yet. The committee has left it up to the National Assembly, i.e. Parliament, to take action against Malema, Times Live reported. According to the code, though, Malema could be reprimanded by the House and or have some of his salary docked, hitting him where it hurts, in his pocket. Finally, on your accountability monitor, you may have heard by now about the murder of Health Department official Babita Deokaran. She was shot outside her house on the 23rd of August. Her work at the Department of Health may have made her a target because she was overseeing a 332 million rand corrupt PPE deal investigation. Several politicians and commentators spoke out praising her work and calling for better protection for people like her. Now, justice is thankfully happening quite fast. 6 suspects linked to the murder appeared for the second time before the Johannesburg Central Court on Monday. In another case, 2 municipal directors in the Eastern Cape had death threats delivered to their door in the form of bullets attached to a picture of themselves and a note saying, "You are next," News 24 reported. The 2 directors are currently presiding over the disciplinary hearings of at least 3 managers in the municipality who are being investigated for charges relating to fraud, corruption, and negligence. It's ordinary people like these, Deokaran and these 2 directors, who are at the coalface of fighting corruption in our country so that our people can get much needed services. We must protect them. On to some politics. What's a wrap update without some political news? The Office of the Presidency confirmed on Tuesday evening that former spokesperson Kusela Diko will return to work, but in a different position in the public service. This has not been confirmed what the position is yet. Now, she received a written warning from the presidency about the conclusion of a disciplinary hearing. If you recall, Diko was put on special leave in February last year, so it's been a while, for her involvement in a scandalous personal protective equipment contract with her late husband, together with former Gauteng Health MEC Bandile Masuku. Now, the presidency has not yet confirmed where Diko will be deployed to, but suffice to say, critics are not happy that she's basically gotten away with just a slap on the wrist. However, do bear in mind, it's not clear if she directly financially benefited from the deal. Meanwhile, the ANC step-aside rule drama continues, with suspended ANC Secretary-General Ace Magashule suffering another court blow this week. Magashule was still arguing that the rule which saw him suspended is unconstitutional, and that his hilarious counter-suspension of party leader Cyril Ramaphosa remained valid until set aside. But the judges of the Gauteng High Court were having none of it. Another blow for Ace. Now it's time for that section we promised you, what you missed. A lot happened while we took our 2 weeks break, and we've been itching to break it down for you. So here goes, 2 top stories. Firstly, Zuma flies the coop. Probably the biggest news while we were away was the bombshell announcement on the 5th of September that former President Jacob Zuma was granted medical parole. He had served only 58 days of his 15-month jail sentence for refusing to testify at the state capture inquiry. Now, the decision was made by one of Zuma's former allies, Correctional Services Commissioner Arthur Fraser, who controversially went against the recommendations of the Medical Parole Board, who denied Zuma parole, saying his condition was stable. Now, look, Fraser is legally within his rights to do this according to the legislation, but of course it looks bad. As the Mail and Guardian pointed out, President Cyril Ramaphosa removed Fraser from his position as spy boss in the State Security Agency to the supposedly more innocuous position at Correctional Services. Turns out reshuffling those old Zuma appointees came back to bite the country. Now, the DA, AfriForum, and the Helen Suzman Foundation are challenging the decision in various ways, but given the wording of the legislation, Fraser is probably in the clear. It sucks, we know, but we're not the only country with these get-out-of-jail loopholes for the powerful. Former U.S. President Donald Trump infamously handed out 144 presidential pardons and sentence commutations less than 12 hours before the end of his presidency, including several well-connected Trump allies who were freed. So, Zuma has been a free man since the 5th of September 2021. However, he's not out of the woods yet, as he still faces criminal proceedings in the courts, including the ongoing arms deal trial. But some legal experts have said that even if he is found guilty, he may not face jail time because of having been given medical parole. This is because it is unlikely that his health will have improved by the time his other trials end. Still, it's important that justice is seen to be done. Another crucial story, and this one an international one that happened while we were on break, was the Texas abortion ban. Now, you've probably heard about this one, and it's pretty distressing. Texan lawmakers managed to pass an extremely regressive abortion law on 1 September, which the country's top court declined to strike down. As activists put it, the law places a bounty on people who provide or aid abortions, inviting random strangers to sue them. It effectively criminalizes those helping a woman get an abortion after 6 weeks. And remember, this is the mark before many women even know they're pregnant, because a woman usually only knows that she's pregnant when she's missed her period once or twice. And the law, most controversially, makes no exception for rape and incest victims. Now, this is an assault on the nation's federal values by a very conservative state, but it's structured in a way that is very difficult to take on, even for U.S. President Joe Biden, who is pro-choice. Now, the state doesn't have to enforce the law. Instead, it allows for private citizens to sue facilities that provide abortions, as well as anyone who aids a woman to get an abortion. Even the Uber driver who may have dropped her off, insurance companies, doctors, and nurses. And they'll get a reward of up to USD $10,000 if they're successful. Abortion patients themselves, however, it must be noted, cannot be sued. But that doesn't mean that people aren't already planning. One of Texas' largest anti-abortion groups launched a website to receive tips about suspected violations and says it has attorneys at the ready to bring lawsuits. Now, wherever you stand on the issue of abortion, the bottom line is that this law is a near declaration of war on women's bodies, and it is the poorest, most vulnerable women driven to dangerous back alley abortions who will suffer most. Several court challenges are underway to try to stop it. Moving on to adulting, with local government elections looming, there isn't much time to register to cast your vote. The final voter registration week will be this weekend, September 18th and 19th. So, You can head over to your local voting district to register if you have not already done so. Only people over the age of 16 can register. Remember to carry your identity document, or you can skip the queues and register or update your details online at registertovote.elections.org.za at any time. So, go forth and make a difference. Finally, rest in peace, Minister Mkhize. This morning we woke to the sad news that Deputy Minister in the Presidency, Professor Hlengiwe Mkhize, had passed away. Mkhize was previously Minister of Higher Education and Training, plus Deputy Minister of Correctional Services. We send our condolences to her family and her colleagues in government. She was also Commissioner at our famous Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Well, that's it from us at The Wrap, a product of Explain.coza, simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love, tell your friends to sign up for the updates at explain.coza/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from the team.